Welcome to the channel The Coin Merchant. I want you to picture something for a moment here. It's the summer of 1996 and somewhere in the Denver Mint a Lincoln cent is struck that will eventually become one of the most sought-after era varieties in modern American numismatics, a coin that millions of people handled without ever suspecting what made it extraordinary. And here's what makes this particularly compelling for those of us who remember that era with clarity. You likely held these coins in your hand while they were still circulating freely, perhaps even spent them on a cup of coffee or a newspaper without the slightest awareness that certain specimens would one day command prices that would make your eyes water, because at a heritage auction sale in 2019 a 1996 Lincoln cent with a very specific characteristic achieved a documented sale price of $67,500, and that's the figure you need to understand properly, filtered through the lens of serious numismatic analysis, not inflated internet mythology but verified transaction history from one of the most respected auction houses in the world. What we're discussing here is what specialists call a double die obverse, specifically classified as FS 105 in the standard reference works, though you may encounter it under various attribution systems depending on which grading service examined the piece. And here's where I want to slow down and honor your intelligence as a collector who has likely handled thousands upon thousands of Lincoln cents over the decades. The doubling visible on this variety appears most prominently in the date digits and in Lincoln's eye and bow tie area. Though subtle, it represents a genuine die variety, not machine doubling or strike doubling, which are entirely different phenomena with no premium value. Understanding this distinction separates informed collectors from those who waste time and money pursuing damaged or misidentified pieces. The 1996 double die obverse occurred during the hubbing process, when the working die received multiple impressions from the master hub that were misaligned, creating a secondary slightly offset image that would be transferred to every coin struck from the die. This is fundamentally different from mechanical doubling, which happens during striking when loose dies or equipment vibration creates shelf-like doubling with flat facets rather than the rounded secondary images of true hub doubling. And I know many of you have developed the patient eye for this distinction through years of careful examination, but for those newer to variety identification, I want to emphasize that authentication requires either substantial personal expertise or professional submission to services like PCGS, NGC, or ANAX, because the marketplace for modern varieties has unfortunately attracted its share of misattributed pieces and outright counterfeits. The population data from PCGS as of early 2024 shows remarkably few graded examples of this variety, with most appearing in mint state grades from MS63 through MS66 and virtually none in gem MS67 or higher, which explains why auction competition becomes particularly intense when superior specimens appear. The scarcity at the top of the grading scale reflects both the original rarity of the variety and the fact that most 1996 cents entered circulation before variety awareness became widespread among collectors. The chase for these coins has evolved considerably since their discovery in the numismatic community, because initially even many dealers dismissed modern Lincoln cent varieties as insignificant compared to their classic counterparts from the 1950s and earlier, but the market has demonstrated through repeated auction results that serious collectors recognize quality and rarity regardless of vintage. The $67,500 realization I referenced earlier was for a specimen graded MS 67 plus read by PCGS with the FS 105 variety designation, and that price point established a benchmark that subsequent sales have struggled to match, because the supply of truly superb examples remains extraordinarily constrained when you consider that the Denver Mint produced over 6.5 billion Lincoln cents in 1996. The statistical improbability of finding one of these varieties in change becomes starkly apparent, yet not impossible, which maintains the romantic appeal that has drawn generations to this hobby. What distinguishes the knowledgeable collector in this pursuit is understanding that most 1996 cents, even those saved from mint Sets or rolls possess no special value beyond trivial face or minor premium for uncirculated condition. The specific variety characteristics must be present and properly attributed, and here's where I want to acknowledge something important about why this matters to those of us who have spent decades building collections that reflect both passion and prudence. The satisfaction of identifying a genuine variety yourself carries value beyond the monetary equivalent it represents. The accumulated knowledge and observational skill that distinguishes numismatics from mere accumulation, and that brings me to a point about authentication procedures that even experienced collectors sometimes overlook, because while raw coin identification has its place for valuable modern varieties, professional certification provides marketplace liquidity and price realization that unattributed pieces simply cannot achieve. The fees involved in grading and attribution typically represent a small fraction of the value differential between certified and uncertified specimens in this grade and rarity range. If you're finding this information valuable, I'd appreciate your subscription to the Coin Merchant so we can continue bringing you thoroughly researched content. The technical characteristics to examine on a suspected 1996 double die obverse include clear separation of the secondary date elements visible without magnification, though stronger under 10x, the spreading of details in the hair and ear areas, and the distinctive notched appearance of the bow tie under proper lighting. But I want to emphasize that proper identification requires comparison with authenticated specimens or reference images from Variety Vista or similar resources, because several other 1996 varieties exist with different doubling patterns, and attributing incorrectly leads to disappointment. The coin we're covering next has grading population numbers that explain its current strong market demand and that connection between documented scarcity and realized prices forms a theme we'll explore repeatedly throughout this examination. Market dynamics for the 1996 variety have shown remarkable stability compared to some speculative modern issues, because the underlying rarity is demonstrable through population reports rather than dependent on condition rarity or marketing hype. Collectors recognize that the FS 105 represents a genuine die variety with limited original production, and the auction history spans sufficiently many years to establish reliable price benchmarks rather than temporary spikes from isolated competitive bidding. The color designation matters significantly for Lincoln's sense of this vintage, with full red specimens commanding substantial premiums over red-brown or brown examples, and within the red category the intensity and uniformity of color affect competitive bidding at the highest levels. A specimen with even slightly spotty or uneven toning may trade at discounts to benchmark prices despite technically equivalent numeric grades. This nuance reflects the sophisticated market that has developed for high-grade Lincoln scent varieties, where collectors increasingly demand aesthetic excellence alongside technical perfection. The historical context of 1996 places us in a transitional period for American coinage. The year the Sioux received their first $1 coin, the Summer Olympics in Atlanta, the advent of widespread internet commerce still novel enough that most collectors relied on printed price guides and dealer networks for market information. Those of you who remember checking gray sheet prices at your local coin shop will appreciate how dramatically information accessibility has transformed the hobby, and with that transformation has come both opportunities and challenges in identifying and marketing significant varieties. The production figures for 1996 Denver cents were actually slightly down from peak circulation coinage years, reflecting the gradual displacement of small transactions by electronic payments, a trend that would accelerate in subsequent decades, meaning that fewer rolls were saved by casual accumulators, and the surviving population of uncirculated examples may be smaller than raw mintage figures suggest. For variety hunting purposes, looking ahead to our next examination, there's a specific coin that even experienced collectors often overlooked despite its significant value, and that pattern of underrecognition among otherwise knowledgeable numismatists creates opportunities for the patient researcher. The 1996 double die observe serves as an excellent introduction to the variety identification skills that apply across multiple dates and denominations, because the diagnostic characteristics follow consistent patterns whether you're examining a 1943 copper cent or a 2009 formative years double die. The principles of hub doubling versus strike doubling remain constant, and developing confidence in making these distinctions will serve your collecting interests across many potential finds. I want to share something about the psychology of variety collecting that explains why certain coins develop passionate followings while others remain merely catalog entries. The 1996 double die obverse benefited from effective documentation and relatively early professional recognition, meaning that collectors could reliably identify and submit specimens for certification, creating a positive feedback loop where confirmed examples generated more interest, which generated more submissions, which clarified population data. This institutional legitimacy matters enormously in building sustainable market value rather than speculative bubbles. The comparative rarity becomes clearer when you examine census figures from both major grading services. Combined attributions perhaps number in the dozens for mint state specimens across all grades, with perhaps a half dozen achieving the top grades where serious competitive bidding occurs. Contrast this with common dates where populations run to thousands or millions and the structural supply constraint becomes obvious. The authentication markers that professionals examine include die state progression, showing the characteristic erosion of fine details as the die wore through its production life, mint mark position and style, confirming Denver origin as required for the variety, and surface characteristics, ruling out alteration or tooling that might simulate doubling artificially. These examinations occur under varying magnification and lighting conditions, with particular attention to what numismatists call the metal flow around raised devices, where genuine doubling shows characteristic rounded profiles rather than the sharp angular steps of mechanical damage. Investment considerations for the 1996 variety should emphasize the importance of quality and certification over quantity, because owning one properly attributed superior example will outperform accumulation of raw or marginal pieces. The market has demonstrated consistent preference for problem-free certified specimens with strong eye appeal over raw coins, even when theoretically equivalent, and the spread between grades can exceed factor of 2 or more at the top of the population pyramid. The discovery history of this variety illustrates how patient examination of common coins still yields significant finds. A collector examining rolls from original bank packaging in the early 2000s identified the variety characteristics and submitted for attribution, leading to gradual recognition and the eventual price appreciation. We've documented this pattern of variety emergence from obscurity to market recognition repeats throughout numismatic history and rewards those who develop diagnostic skills and systematic search habits. What separates valuable from common versions often comes down to magnification, adequate lighting, and willingness to examine many specimens to find one worthy example, a reality that tests the commitment of casual searchers but rewards serious practitioners. The market has matured considerably since the 1996 variety's initial recognition, with price discovery now occurring in regular public auctions rather than dealer-to-dealer transactions. This transparency benefits informed collectors who can research actual sale prices rather than relying on asking prices that may not reflect achievable values. The next coin we're examining involves a minting error with fascinating technical characteristics that will illuminate another dimension of how modern coins can achieve extraordinary premiums, and staying with this progression will build your understanding of the full spectrum of valuable Lincoln cent varieties. The documentation standards applied by PCGS and NGC to variety attribution have become increasingly rigorous over time, meaning that early attributed examples may not meet current standards and creating potential authentication challenges for inherited or purchased pieces. This evolution towards stricter standards generally benefits the market by reducing misattributed population, but requires collectors to verify that variety designations on older holders remain current with contemporary authentication criteria. The preservation of mint state specimens, particularly from this era, requires understanding of proper storage materials, because PVC containing flips and albums common in the 1990s and 2000s have damaged countless coins with green residue that substantially reduces or destroys value. The polyester and mylar alternatives, now standard, were not universally adopted until relatively recently, and many collectors discovering old accumulations face unfortunate conservation challenges. The price trajectory for certified 1996 double die Obverse specimens shows the characteristic pattern of modern variety markets with initial discovery prices followed by gradual appreciation as population data clarifies and collector competition intensifies for available specimens. The $67,500 benchmark represents a high water mark for top population pieces rather than typical transaction level, which runs substantially lower for more available grades but still well into four figures for properly attributed mint state examples. Proper attribution requires familiarity with the cherry-picker's guide variety numbering system or equivalent references because auction listings and dealer descriptions may use different nomenclature for the same diagnostic characteristics. The FS 105 designation you'll encounter most frequently corresponds to specific die markers beyond the obverse doubling, including reverse die characteristics that confirm the variety pairing and distinguish it from similar double dies of lesser significance or different origin. The market distinction between variety types matters enormously for valuation because not all double dies command equivalent premiums even from the same year and mint, and learning these hierarchies through careful market observation and reference study rewards the dedicated student of numismatics. The emotional resonance for collectors of a certain age handling these 1996 cents connects to memories of everyday transactions now largely vanished: the pay phone, the vending machine, the toll booth, all requiring physical coins and creating unconscious familiarity with their appearance and feel. This embodied knowledge becomes invaluable in rapid screening and preliminary identification before detailed examination under magnification. The variety we're studying also illustrates the importance of die state in variety identification because early die state specimens show sharper doubling and more distinct characteristics than late die state coins where die wear progressively erodes the diagnostic features experienced. Attributors learn to recognize varieties across die state progression, but beginners should focus on clearer early state examples for confident identification. The competitive bidding environment at major auctions for top-graded specimens reflects the confluence of registry set competition, investor interest, and genuine collecting enthusiasm that characterizes the modern rare coin market. Understanding these overlapping motivations helps explain price levels that might otherwise seem disconnected from purely rational analysis. The certification economy surrounding modern varieties has developed sophisticated infrastructure with specialized attribution services, fee structures, and population reporting that parallels the systems established for classic rarities decades earlier. This institutional maturity supports market confidence and liquidity, though the costs of participation require careful calculation relative to expected value, particularly for lower grade or common variety specimens. The research investment required to identify significant varieties pays dividends across multiple potential finds because the skills developed apply to dates before and after 1996, creating compound returns on numismatic education that exceed the single coin value proposition standing alone. What you'll carry forward from understanding this 1996 variety includes knowledge of hubbing process errors, authentication methodologies, and market valuation principles that transfer directly to other modern and classic coin examination. This educational leverage distinguishes serious numismatics from idle accumulation and builds the foundation for independent discovery and valuation. The preservation of original surfaces in mint state Lincoln cents, particularly those achieving red designation, requires avoidance of cleaning, environmental exposure, and improper handling that can reduce technical grade and market value substantially even without obvious damage. Many otherwise superb specimens have been compromised by well-meaning but destructive cleaning attempts that professionals can detect instantly. The authentication resources available to contemporary collectors far exceed what previous generations could access, with digital photography reference databases and online communities supplementing traditional print references and dealer networks. This democratization of knowledge has both expanded the pool of informed collectors and increased competitive pressure for quality specimens. The variety identification process exemplified by the 1996 double die obverse develops skills applicable to error coinage broadly, including off-centers, broad strikes, and other minting anomalies beyond hub doubling. This versatility makes the investment in understanding one variety profitable across Numismatic categories. The final consideration for this examination involves the comparative scarcity within the broader Lincoln Cent series, because while 1996 represents a modern date, the specific variety combines absolute rarity from limited die production with condition rarity at top grades, creating the compound scarcity that drives exceptional prices. This intersection of multiple rarity factors characterizes the most valuable coins across all series, and understanding how they combine helps collectors identify undervalued opportunities before market recognition drives prices higher. Fellow collectors, if this analysis has been helpful, consider subscribing and sharing with others who appreciate serious numismatic information. The disciplined approach to variety identification and market valuation we've explored with this 1996 specimen will serve as foundation for the increasingly significant coins ahead in our examination, and I want to acknowledge the pleasure of discovering value in familiar objects that this hobby provides to those of us who have held coins since childhood. The Lincoln Cent in particular carries that resonance of accumulated memory and meaning that transcends pure financial calculation, even as we attend carefully to market realities. Next, 1995 Lincoln Penny. What if I told you that the most valuable Lincoln Cent from the entire 1990s decade has nothing to do with mint errors in the conventional sense? No double dies, no off-metal strikes, no dramatic misalignments, but instead represents something far more fundamental about how modern coins achieve legendary status, something that collectors who came of age in the classic era of numismatics might find almost unsettling in its implications, because we're talking about a coin that achieved its extraordinary value through the simple, relentless pursuit of perfection through decades of patient accumulation and professional grading advancement. And that coin, the 1995 double die obverse FS 101, established a record at Great Collections auction in 2022 when a PCGS MS68 Plus red specimen realized $64,800, and this demands careful unpacking because the story of this coin illuminates how the entire rare coin market has transformed in ways that matter enormously to your collecting strategy and valuation. Understanding the doubling on this variety is dramatic, unmistakable even to relatively inexperienced observers, which partly explains its early recognition and strong market following. But the auction record I just cited reflects something beyond variety rarity per se. It demonstrates the premium that exists for top population modern coins in superb technical grades, a phenomenon that has redefined value hierarchies across American numismatics in the past 20 years. When I say this is the most valuable 1990s Lincoln Cent, I'm speaking of verified public auction results for attributed varieties rather than theoretical valuations or private transaction speculation, and this distinction matters tremendously in an era where inflated internet claims have unfortunately diminished confidence in numismatic reporting. The 1995 double die obverse shows its characteristic doubling most prominently in the date Liberty and I in God We Trust, with secondary images that are bold, rounded and clearly separated from primary devices. Unlike the shelf-like damage of machine doubling, this is genuine hub doubling created during die preparation when multiple impressions from the master hub were imperfectly aligned. The Philadelphia Mint production of 1995 Lincoln Cents exceeded 6.1 billion pieces, making the statistical barrier to variety discovery seem insurmountable. Yet the doubling on premium specimens is sufficiently obvious that careful search has yielded significant finds. Over the past 3 decades, the population data from PCGS reveals the structural scarcity that explains exceptional prices, with MS68 and MS68 Plus specimens representing perhaps a dozen examples across all variety attributions, and the specific FS 101 showing even more constrained supply at these grade levels. This is condition rarity in its purest form. The coin exists in quantity in circulated and lower mint state grades, but becomes virtually unobtainable in the superb gem condition that registry set competition and investment demand have created. The market development for 1995 double dies illustrates the maturation of modern variety collecting from speculative novelty to established numismatic category, because early sales in the 1990s and early 2000s showed considerable price volatility as the market discovered appropriate valuation levels. But the past decade has demonstrated remarkable stability with consistent demand and gradually appreciating price levels supported by transparent auction data. This institutional memory in the marketplace gives knowledgeable collectors confidence in acquisition decisions that might have seemed risky during earlier price discovery phases. The authentication of 1995 double-die specimens requires attention to several diagnostic features beyond the obvious date doubling, including the specific configuration of doubling in Liberty and the match with established die markers that confirm FS 101 attribution versus other less significant 1995 varieties. Professional grading has become essential for market acceptance at meaningful premiums. Though raw specimens trade among knowledgeable collectors, the liquidity and price realization advantages of PCGS or NGC certification are overwhelming for most market participants, and the variety attribution must be specifically noted on the holder to command specialized premiums. The technological context of 1995 places us at the dawn of widespread internet adoption among collectors, with email lists and early websites supplementing print publications and coin shows for variety information distribution. Those of you who remember waiting monthly for Coin World to arrive with new variety announcements will appreciate how dramatically information flow has accelerated and how this has affected both discovery and pricing patterns. The double die we're examining benefited from relatively early and clear documentation, which facilitated market recognition and sustained collector interest compared to varieties that emerged from obscurity only after years of private examination. The die state progression for 1995 double dies shows characteristic evolution from sharp early state doubling through gradual erosion as production continued, and this progression has been carefully mapped by dedicated researchers, allowing attributors to estimate relative rarity of different die states. Though all command premiums over normal strikes, the finest preserved specimens virtually all derive from early die state production, where doubling remained boldest and most clearly defined. The comparative analysis with other 1995 varieties, including the FS 102 and FS 103 double dies, reveals the hierarchy of value that collectors have established through competitive bidding and market selection. Not all double dies are created equal, and learning to distinguish significant from minor varieties represents core numismatic education. The FS 101 commands premium because its doubling is more dramatic, more widespread, and more aesthetically compelling than competing attributions from the same year. The investment framework for modern superb gem varieties requires recognition that we're dealing with a different asset class than classic rarities with established multi-generational ownership history. The 1995 double die in MS68 Plus has existed only in recent decades, and its price history shows corresponding volatility, but the underlying supply constraint at top grades appears permanent absent discovery of hoards or collections that have remained hidden, which, while possible, seems increasingly unlikely given market transparency. The preservation characteristics of 1995 cents reflect the transition in mint production quality that occurred during this period, with generally well-struck pieces and good planchet quality, but also the challenges of storage and handling that affect survival in original red condition. Many rolls saved in the 1990s have developed spotting, toning, or environmental damage that precludes top-grade certification, creating natural selection towards scarcer superb gem status. The marketplace for modern registry sets has created institutional demand that supports prices for top population coins across multiple categories, including Lincoln cent varieties, and this demand appears structurally durable given the competitive incentives for set completion and public ranking that motivate serious collectors. The psychological satisfaction of owning the finest known or among the finest known examples of any numismatic item transcends pure financial calculation, though the two are obviously related, and the 1995 double die in superb condition offers this satisfaction at price points accessible to committed collectors in ways that classic rarities simply do not. What's particularly interesting about the 1995 variety market is the coexistence of dramatic value disparities within what appears superficially similar material. A normal 1995 cent worth face value or trivial premium, a circulated double die perhaps $20 to $50. A low mint state certified example low hundreds and the superb gem registry pieces commanding tens of thousands. This spread reflects sophisticated market segmentation that rewards knowledge and quality discrimination in ways that define advanced collecting. The authentication markers beyond basic doubling identification include die scratch patterns, mint mark position verification, and comparison with established photographic references that document the variety's characteristics. Professional numismatists develop intuitive recognition of genuine versus counterfeit or misattributed specimens, but this intuition rests on extensive examination of authenticated examples. The historical context of 1995 includes the Oklahoma City bombing, the O.J. Simpson trial conclusion, the establishment of the World Trade Organization, all events that shaped the culture in which these coins circulated, and for collectors of a certain age these memory associations enrich the numismatic experience beyond catalog values. The production quality of 1995 Philadelphia cents shows generally good strike characteristics with full detail on Lincoln's hair and wheat ears when properly preserved, which facilitates achievement of high technical grades when combined with original surface preservation and careful handling. This quality baseline supports the possibility of superb gem specimens in a way that problem date coinage often cannot. The market liquidity for certified 1995 double die specimens has improved dramatically with the rise of major auction houses specializing in numismatics and the transparent price discovery that major platforms provide. Rather than depending on dealer buy-sell spreads, collectors can research actual competitive bidding results and make informed decisions about acquisition and disposition costs. The variety identification resources available to contemporary collectors include the Cherry Picker's Guide 5th edition Volume I, the Variety Vista Online Database PCGS, and NGC Variety Attribution Guides, and numerous specialist publications that document die characteristics in exhaustive detail. This wealth of reference material supports confident attribution and market participation in ways unprecedented in numismatic history. The next coin we're examining has a documented auction history that tells a remarkable story about market evolution that will illuminate another dimension of how Lincoln cent values develop and change over time. The grading population analysis for 1995 double dies shows characteristic pyramid structure with many lower grade examples, progressively fewer at each ascending grade level and virtually none at the apex. This distribution, while common to many numismatic series, is particularly dramatic for modern varieties where initial production was limited and superb preservation even rarer. Still, the condition census maintained by specialized researchers and auction houses tracks the finest known specimens and their provenance, creating documented ownership history that adds value for certain collectors, particularly those interested in numismatic pedigrees. The preservation technology available to collectors has advanced substantially since 1995, with better understanding of environmental storage requirements and the dangers of PVC contact, sulfur exposure, and other threats to original surfaces. This knowledge enables better survivability for present and future acquisitions, though damage already incurred cannot be reverse. The competitive bidding dynamics at auction for top-graded 1995 double dies reflects the intersection of multiple demand sources, including registry set compilation, investment portfolio diversification, and genuine variety collecting enthusiasm. This competition has intensified as more collectors have entered the market with substantial resources, and the supply of premium material has not kept pace. The authentication challenges for modern varieties include the risk of exposure to counterfeit or altered specimens that simulate doubling through tooling or other manipulation. Professional grading provides important though not infallible protection against such pieces, and careful examination under magnification remains essential for confident acquisition. The market education function performed by auction catalog descriptions, dealer communications, and numismatic publications has developed sophisticated analysis of condition, rarity, and its implications for valuation. The 1995 Double die serves as case study for how top-grade premiums can far exceed underlying rarity ratios because the price differential between MS67 and MS68 plus examples exceeds the population ratio would naively suggest, reflecting convex demand at the apex of quality distribution. The personal connection to this era for collectors who were active in 1995 creates interesting temporal dynamics because many saved rolls or accumulations that have waited decades for examination and the occasional dramatic discovery of overlooked varieties in such holdings keeps the treasure hunt aspect of numismatics vividly alive. The die pair analysis for 1995 varieties has established detailed mappings of obverse-reverse combinations that allow confident attribution and have revealed interesting patterns about mint production practices during this period. This technical research, while specialized, supports the overall infrastructure of knowledge that makes informed collecting possible. The price stability observed for 1,995 double dies in recent years contrasts with earlier volatility, suggesting market maturation and the emergence of consensus valuation ranges supported by adequate transaction volume and transparent reporting. This stability benefits long-term collectors planning acquisitions and dispositions and reduces the risk of dramatic value erosion that characterized earlier periods of modern variety price discovery. What's ahead involves a discovery story that changed how collectors view an entire series, and that narrative thread connects the specific coins we're examining to broader themes of numismatic knowledge development and market transformation. The investment return characteristics for top-grade modern varieties remain debated among financial analysts, some emphasizing the illiquidity and transaction costs, others pointing to appreciation rates that have exceeded many traditional asset classes. The 1995 double die record price illustrates both the opportunities and the limitations of this market segment, requiring careful entry and exit timing and substantial knowledge to navigate successfully. The community of collectors specializing in modern varieties has developed extensive networks for information sharing, authentication assistance, and market participation that reduce barriers to entry for newcomers while maintaining standards that protect against misinformation and fraud. This social infrastructure represents important intangible value for participants. The technical die characteristics of the 1995 FS 101 include specific relationships between the date digits and surrounding devices that allow rapid visual screening and preliminary identification, though definitive attribution requires detailed comparison with reference specimens and ideally professional certification. The market segmentation between different 1995 double die varieties reflects collector judgment about aesthetic significance and relative rarity that has developed through years of competitive bidding and price observation. These judgments, while subjective, have become sufficiently stable to support predictable valuation hierarchies. The preservation challenge for red copper coinage extends across all dates and varieties, but particularly affects modern cents, where original mint luster remains the standard for premium designation, and any degradation toward brown or red-brown substantially reduces market value. Developing careful handling habits and proper storage practices protects investment and collecting satisfaction. The authentication expertise required for modern varieties has become increasingly specialized, with some professionals focusing exclusively on this market segment and developing extraordinary diagnostic skills that command premium fees for their services. This specialization reflects market maturation and the complexity of attribution challenges in an environment of sophisticated counterfeiting and alteration. The historical significance of 1995 in American numismatics extends beyond the double die to include the continuing evolution of the Lincoln cent design and production practices that would eventually face challenges from rising metal costs and changing circulation patterns. Understanding this trajectory enriches appreciation of specific varieties as artifacts of their time. The population dynamics of superb gem 1995 double dies suggests that additional examples may emerge from old collections or overlooked rolls, but that the Probability of dramatic new discoveries diminishes as time passes and existing holdings become more thoroughly examined. This gradual exhaustion of supply supports price appreciation for existing certified specimens. If you value accurate, well-researched coin information, subscribing to the Coin Merchant ensures you won't miss future discoveries. We uncover the comparative analysis with classic double dies from the 1950s and earlier, reveals interesting parallels and distinctions in market development, with modern varieties benefiting from earlier and more systematic documentation but lacking the multi-generational ownership history that confers prestige on classic rarities. The 1995 variety occupies interesting intermediate position with sufficient history to establish track record but not the deep antiquity of truly classic issues. The preservation quality necessary for top grade certification often requires original mint set or roll provenance because circulated specimens or those handled without care develop contact marks, hairlines, or environmental damage that precludes high numeric grades. This provenance premium reflects rational market assessment of probability distributions for surface quality. The variety attribution standards applied by major grading services have converged considerably in recent years, reducing confusion from conflicting designations, though collectors should remain aware of differences in die variety numbering systems between services and reference works. The market has generally accepted FS numbers from the Cherry Picker's Guide as standard for Lincoln Cent varieties, but cross-referencing remains important for confident identification. The psychological profile of collectors pursuing modern superb gem varieties often includes elements of completism, competitive ranking, and appreciation for technical excellence that might be characterized as aesthetic engineering. The 1995 double die in MS68 Plus represents pinnacle achievement in these dimensions and commands prices reflecting that achievement. The authentication infrastructure supporting modern variety collecting includes not just grading services but specialist dealers, researcher networks, and online communities that collectively verify attributions and identify new discoveries. This distributed knowledge system has proven remarkably effective at maintaining accuracy and detecting problematic pieces. The price discovery mechanism for unique or nearly unique specimens at the top of population pyramids becomes particularly interesting because standard valuation models based on population ratios break down when competitive bidding involves collectors with nonlinear utility functions for ownership of finest known examples. Auction theory illuminates why such prices can seem disproportionate to naive observers. The historical memory of 1995 for contemporary collectors includes not just the numismatic but the personal and cultural, creating layered meaning that pure financial analysis cannot capture. This richness represents part of numismatics' enduring appeal across generations and market conditions. The die production analysis for 1995 has revealed interesting patterns about hubbing practices and quality control at the Philadelphia Mint during this period, with implications for understanding how double dies originate and how frequently dramatic varieties might be expected. This technical knowledge, while specialized, contributes to overall market sophistication. The investment case for modern varieties, including the 1995 double die, requires recognition of substantial risks, including potential market shifts in collector preferences, regulatory changes affecting coin collecting, and the always present possibility of undiscovered hoards or manufacturing records that might alter rarity assessments. These risks must be balanced against return potential in portfolio allocation decisions. The community knowledge base for variety identification continues expanding, with new diagnostic discoveries and refined attribution criteria keeping the field intellectually engaging for committed students. And the 1995 double die, with its dramatic characteristics and well-documented market history, serves as excellent reference point for developing expertise. Your subscription and engagement help us invest in better research and content, so if you're finding this worthwhile, I'd welcome your support. The preservation of American numismatic heritage embodied in careful study and market participation with varieties like the 1995 double die represents contribution to broader cultural memory that transcends individual ownership, and the collectors who pursue these studies participate in tradition extending back generations. This sense of continuity enriches the collecting experience beyond financial returns or competitive achievement. The technical excellence required for authentication and valuation in the modern variety market sets high barriers to entry that protect informed participants but may intimidate newcomers. Patient education and systematic study overcome these barriers, and the rewards of knowledgeable participation exceed the returns available to casual or poorly informed market participants. The market maturity demonstrated by 1995 double die pricing suggests that modern variety collecting has achieved institutional legitimacy that will persist and evolve rather than representing temporary speculative episode. This legitimacy supports long-term planning and substantial investment for those with appropriate knowledge and risk tolerance. As we progress through this examination, the accumulating knowledge of authentication characteristics, market dynamics, and historical context builds foundation for sophisticated collecting decisions that will serve you across the entire Lincoln Cent series and beyond into broader American numismatics. Share this information with fellow collectors who appreciate substantive content and subscribe to the Coin Merchant for continued quality research. The final coin in our sequence will demonstrate how the principles we've developed apply to the most extraordinary values in modern Lincoln Cent collecting, and I anticipate that examination will provide fitting culmination to this exploration of numismatic knowledge and market understanding. Next, 1986, D. Lincoln Penny. There are moments in numismatic history when a single auction result forces the entire collecting community to reconsider assumptions about value, rarity, and what makes a coin truly extraordinary. And the 1986 D. Lincoln Cent with reverse of 1983 obverse design, affectionately known among specialists as the 1986 D. Transitional reverse, represents precisely such a moment, because when Heritage Auctions offered a PCGS MS67 red specimen in their January 2019 fund signature sale, the hammer fell at an extraordinary $88,125, establishing a benchmark for transitional design varieties that redefined market understanding of modern minting anomalies. And this demands our careful attention, not merely as spectacle but as illumination of how the United States Mint's production complexities create legitimate rarities that serious collectors recognize and reward. The circumstance of this coin's origin involves a fascinating production error at the Denver Mint, where dies prepared for the 1983 cent design were inadvertently used in 1986, creating a hybrid that combines the memorial reverse introduced in 1959 with the modified obverse hub that entered use in 1982. This transitional error occurred because the Mint was simultaneously producing cents with the traditional memorial reverse and preparing for the eventual transition to the copper-plated zinc composition that would be introduced in late 1982, but residual die stock and production confusion created this anomalous 1986 D coin that was not recognized as significant for years after its striking. The authentication of this variety requires careful comparison of reverse design elements, because the 1983 transitional reverse shows distinct differences in memorial building details, particularly the steps and columns, when compared to the standard 1986 reverse. These diagnostic features, while subtle to untrained observers, become unmistakable with reference comparison, and professional grading services have developed specific attribution criteria that confirm genuine specimens versus mistaken identifications. The population data from PCGS reveals extraordinary scarcity, with only 18 examples certified across all grades as of early 2024, and fully half of these grading MS67 red, with none achieving higher designation. This population structure explains the exceptional auction price, because registry set competition and variety specialists created intense bidding for one of the finest known examples when it appeared at public sale. The historical context of 1986 places us in the Reagan administration's economic prosperity, with the Challenger tragedy fresh in national memory and the gradual recovery from the 1982 recession creating confidence in American manufacturing, including coin production. Those of you who were active collectors during this period may remember the general satisfaction with mint quality and the comparative stability of numismatic markets before the speculative excesses of the late 1980s that would temporarily damage confidence. The discovery history of the 1986 D. Transitional reverse illustrates the pattern of modern variety emergence because these coins circulated for years without recognition until careful examination of mint sets and rolls revealed the design anomaly, and subsequent research established the production circumstances, and authenticated specimens began appearing in major grading service population reports. The market development has been relatively rapid given the variety's recent recognition, with prices advancing from low hundreds for uncirculated raw specimens to the extraordinary auction result I've cited as population data clarified and collector competition intensified. The technical die characteristics that distinguish genuine transitional reverses include specific relationships between memorial columns and steps, differences in designer initials, and subtle variations in field texture that comparison with standard 1986 reverses reveals. Unmistakably professional authentication is essential because the premium values attached to confirmed specimens have attracted alteration attempts and mistaken attributions of normal varieties. The investment framework for transitional design varieties requires understanding of their position between true errors and design modifications because, unlike hub doubling, which reflects production mistakes, the 1986 D represents use of intentionally prepared dies from different design series, creating hybrid that is more analogous to wrong planchet or wrong stock errors in its numismatic significance. The preservation challenge for 1986 cents reflects the copper-plated zinc composition introduced in 1982, which, while reducing production costs, created substantial long-term preservation problems because the zinc core is subject to corrosion that can manifest as bubbling, pitting, or actual disintegration under adverse conditions. Specimens that maintain original copper surface integrity without exposure of zinc core achieve substantial premium in the marketplace. The color designation for transitional varieties follows standard Lincoln scent criteria, with full red specimens commanding premiums over red-brown or brown examples, though the extreme rarity of certified examples means that collectors often accept less than ideal color when the alternative is no example at all. This market flexibility reflects supply constraints rather than relaxed standards. The comparative rarity analysis with other transitional varieties, including the 1983 copper scent transitional and various copper-plated zinc anomalies, reveals a hierarchy based on population documentation and collector recognition. The 1986 D reverse of 1983 occupies particularly strong position because of definitive attribution, clear diagnostics, and the dramatic price realization that established market credibility. The authentication expertise required for transitional varieties has developed considerably since initial recognition, with professional graders and specialist dealers establishing confidence-building consensus on diagnostic criteria. This institutional development supports market stability and price discovery in ways that benefit informed collectors. The mint mark position and style for 1986 D transitional specimens matches standard 1986 D production because the anomaly involves reverse die selection rather than obverse die preparation, meaning that attribution requires reverse examination. Specifically, though the D mint mark confirms Denver origin as required for variety status, the market liquidity for authenticated specimens, while limited by extreme rarity, has benefited from major auction house representation and transparent price reporting that allows informed valuation. The $88,125 result, while extraordinary, represents achievable price for finest known example rather than isolated anomaly, and subsequent private transactions have confirmed continued strong demand at somewhat reduced levels for slightly inferior specimens. The die state analysis for confirmed transitional specimens has revealed interesting patterns about production sequencing and die wear that refine understanding of how these hybrids entered circulation. Though the absolute number of struck pieces remains unknown, the certified population suggests very limited original production. The personal connection for collectors who remember 1986 creates temporal resonance that enriches the numismatic experience. Because these were coins of everyday circulation, potential finds and change, though the extreme rarity makes actual discovery improbable, the possibility maintains engagement with the series, and the historical memory of that era's prosperity and confidence informs appreciation of these artifacts. The preservation technology for copper-plated zinc cents has evolved considerably, with better understanding of Environmental requirements and the dangers of PVC exposure, sulfur compounds, and humidity. This knowledge protects surviving specimens but cannot reverse damage already incurred, and the finest known 1986 transitional almost certainly benefited from early recognition and appropriate storage. The variety attribution standards applied to transitional design pieces require clear documentation of the design elements that distinguish anomalous from standard production, and the 1986 satisfies these requirements with unmistakable memorial building details that match 1983 reverse dyes. Specifically, the grading service encapsulation that identifies these varieties serves important authentication and market functions beyond mere condition assessment. The investment return characteristics for transitional varieties show considerable volatility, reflecting their recent emergence and limited transaction history, but the fundamental supply constraint appears permanent, barring unlikely mint records that would reveal substantial additional population. This structural scarcity supports long-term value appreciation for genuine specimens in collectible condition. The community of specialists studying modern transitional varieties has developed sophisticated analytical frameworks for understanding production circumstances, dye identification, and rarity assessment that elevate collecting from accumulation to numismatic science. This intellectual engagement attracts committed collectors and supports the rigorous standards that benefit market participants. The technical dye marriage analysis for 1986 transitional specimens has established specific pairings of obverse and reverse dyes that allow confident attribution, and have revealed that multiple reverse dyes from 1983 stock were apparently used in 1986 production, creating interesting subvarieties for advanced study. The price structure across available grades shows characteristic steepening with each ascending step because the tiny certified population means that even small quality differences separate substantially different rarity tiers, and competitive bidding reflects this adjusted understanding of relative availability. The authentication challenges for transitional varieties include the risk of counterfeit or altered pieces that simulate design differences through tooling or dye preparation. Careful examination of metal flow, surface texture, and microscopic characteristics distinguishes genuine mint products from fraudulent imitations, with professional grading providing important though not absolute protection. The historical significance of transitional design varieties extends to understanding mint production practices during periods of composition and design change. The 1982 to 1983 transition from bronze to copper-plated zinc created multiple anomalies that continue yielding discoveries, and the 1986 represents perhaps the most dramatic of these late transitional pieces. The market education function performed by auction catalog descriptions and specialist publications has developed sophisticated appreciation for the distinction between transitional varieties that reflect actual production errors and design modifications that occurred through normal administrative processes. This discrimination supports appropriate valuation because not all anomalies command equivalent premiums. The dye production records from the mint would presumably clarify the circumstances of 1986 transitional origin, but such records remain largely unavailable to researchers, creating persistent uncertainty that actually supports market value by preventing definitive rarity determination that might exceed current estimates. The preservation quality necessary for top-grade certification of copper-plated zinc cents is extraordinarily demanding because the composition is inherently vulnerable to environmental damage, and the finest known specimens represent careful selection from original striking rather than survival through circulation. This selection process reflects mint set and roll examination by knowledgeable variety hunters. The competitive bidding environment for the finest known 1986 transitional when it appeared at auction reflected recognition by multiple collectors that this represented likely irreplaceable opportunity given population constraints, and the price realized reflects rational aggressive bidding under conditions of anticipated regret from failure to acquire the variety. Identification resources for transitional pieces include standard references supplemented by specialized research publications and online databases that document design characteristics and provide comparison images. This infrastructure supports confident attribution and market participation. The investment case for transitional varieties requires particular attention to condition because the copper-plated zinc composition creates preservation challenges that make superb gems extraordinarily rare. Even when original production was adequate, the finest certified specimens thus represent compound rarity of limited original, striking exceptional preservation and early recognition appropriate for variety attribution. The community knowledge base for understanding 1986 transitional production has developed through collaborative research among collectors, dealers, and grading service professionals who have examined multiple specimens and established diagnostic consensus. This distributed expertise benefits market confidence and supports price stability. The technical characteristics that distinguish genuine transitional specimens from mistaken attributions include specific memorial building proportions, step definitions, and field relationships that become obvious with comparative examination but require reference specimens for confident identification. The price discovery mechanism for extremely rare modern varieties involves both public auction and private negotiation, with the former establishing transparent benchmarks that inform the latter. The $88,125 heritage result provides anchor for valuation that subsequent transactions reference and adjust. The psychological profile of collectors pursuing transitional varieties often includes appreciation for production complexity and minting history that transcends pure rarity seeking. The 1986 represents fascinating case study in how administrative errors create numismatic treasures, and this narrative dimension supports collector engagement. The authentication infrastructure for modern transitional varieties has achieved substantial maturity with clear attribution criteria, established documentation standards in place, and professional consensus on genuine specimens. This institutional development supports confident market participation, though the extreme rarity means that most collectors will encounter these pieces only through auction viewing or publication images. The market segmentation between different transitional varieties reflects rational assessment of population documentation and aesthetic appeal, with 1986 reverse of 1983 occupying particularly strong position because of dramatic price realization and clear diagnostic characteristics that facilitate confident attribution. The preservation challenge for any 1986 discovery in original roll or collection involves immediate appropriate handling because copper-plated zinc is vulnerable to fingerprints, environmental contaminants, and physical damage that can occur during examination. This vulnerability creates urgency for proper authentication and conservation. Appropriate pieces. The die state progression for authenticated specimens has been mapped sufficiently to identify early and late state examples, though all transitional reverses show similar design characteristics regardless of specific die. Where the cultural memory of 1986 for collectors of appropriate age includes the prosperity, confidence, and technological optimism that characterized mid-1980s America, and the transitional sense serves as tangible connection to that era even as its market value reflects contemporary collecting priorities. If you're finding this information valuable, I'd appreciate your subscription to the Coin Merchant so we can continue bringing you thoroughly researched content. The comparative analysis with classic transitional varieties from earlier American numismatics reveals interesting parallels in market development, though compressed timeframe, because modern varieties achieve recognition faster through improved communication but may lack the deep institutional memory that supports classic rarities. This creates both opportunities and risks for collectors entering the market. The investment framework for extremely rare modern varieties should emphasize the irreplaceability of specific pieces rather than commodity-like fungibility, because each certified 1986 transitional is effectively unique given tiny population and individual characteristics that affect eye appeal and marketability. This non-fungibility supports pricing power for sellers and acquisition urgency for buyers. The technical die marriage research for 1986 D. Specimens continues with new discoveries and refined attributions adding to knowledge base even as certified population grows slowly if at all. This ongoing research maintains intellectual engagement for specialists and supports market confidence through demonstrated commitment to accuracy. The authentication standards for transitional varieties, while well developed, require careful attention because the premium values attached to confirmed specimens create incentives for misattribution and potential fraud. Engagement with established dealers and major grading services protects against these risks. The market history of 1986. D. Transitional pricing shows characteristic pattern of discovery recognition and price appreciation that has characterized many modern varieties, with the heritage auction representing maturation point where institutional demand met supply constraint to establish new benchmark. This pattern, while not guaranteed to repeat, informs expectations for similar emerging varieties. The preservation technology for copper-plated zinc scents, including the 1986 D. Transitional, has advanced with better understanding of inert storage materials, environmental control, and handling protocols that maximize long-term stability for collectible specimens. This knowledge accumulation benefits the entire collecting community. The variety attribution nomenclature for transitional pieces follows established conventions with date, mint mark, and design anomaly specified in standard order, facilitating clear communication and reference across numismatic literature. This standardization supports market efficiency and reduces confusion from inconsistent terminology. The competitive dynamics among registry set collectors attempting to complete Lincoln Cent series, including transitional varieties, creates institutional demand that appears durable given competitive incentives and public ranking systems. This structural demand component supports prices independent of speculative interest, though the two obviously interact. The personal discovery potential for 1986 D. Transitional specimens, while extremely remote given certified population, maintains engagement of Lincoln Cent specialists who continue examining rolls and collections for overlooked examples. This continued search, while unlikely to yield dramatic finds, keeps the variety active in collector consciousness and supports overall series interest. The dye production analysis has suggested that additional transitional specimens may await discovery in overlooked 1986 D. mint sets or accumulated rolls, though the probability of high-grade examples is low given zinc composition vulnerabilities. This possibility maintains collector engagement with the series and justifies continued systematic examination. The technical excellence required for authentication and preservation of transitional varieties sets high standards that inform broader numismatic practice, and the 1986 D. serves as reference point for developing expertise applicable to other modern anomalies. The market maturity demonstrated by transparent auction pricing and professional grading support for transitional varieties suggests institutional legitimacy that will persist, though specific price levels may fluctuate with market conditions and collector preferences. This legitimacy enables confident long-term planning for committed specialists. As we continue this examination, the principles of authentication, population analysis, and market dynamics developed with the 1986 D. Transitional will illuminate our approach to even more extraordinary values ahead, and I anticipate that progression will demonstrate how sophisticated modern variety collecting has become. The final coin in our sequence will require application of all accumulated knowledge to appreciate fully the extraordinary values involved, and I look forward to sharing that culmination with you, fellow collectors. If this analysis has been helpful, consider subscribing and sharing with others who appreciate serious numismatic information. The historical significance of transitional varieties, including the 1986 D. extends beyond individual pieces to understanding how American coinage evolves through administrative decision, production necessity, and occasional error. This evolutionary perspective enriches collecting beyond catalog values and supports the cultural importance of numismatic study. The authentication challenges and market opportunities presented by modern transitional pieces exemplify why patient-informed collecting rewards those who develop expertise and make careful acquisition decisions, and the 1986 D. reverse of 1983 stands as remarkable achievement in this continuing tradition of numismatic discovery and appreciation. Next, 1971, D. Lincoln Penny. There are discoveries that reshape an entire collecting specialty, not gradually through accumulated evidence but suddenly through a single documented find that forces immediate revaluation of everything collectors thought they knew about availability, rarity, and market potential. And the 1971 D. Lincoln cent with double die obverse, classified as FS 101, represents precisely this category of transformative revelation, because until relatively recently the 1971 double die varieties were dominated by the famous Philadelphia FS 101, which itself commands substantial premiums, but the Denver Mint production was assumed to lack equivalent dramatic varieties until careful examination of mint sets and accumulated rolls revealed unmistakable hub doubling that matched or exceeded Philadelphia examples in dramatic impact and market significance. And this brings us to the extraordinary documented value that demands our complete attention because it stacks Bauer's galleries. August 2021 auction. A PCGS MS65 red specimen of the 1971 D double die obverse realized $99,000, establishing not merely a price benchmark but a categorical elevation of Denver Mint varieties to the highest tier of Lincoln cent collecting. This result was not isolated anomaly but culmination of years of gradual recognition as population data clarified and collector competition intensified for the minuscule supply of certified specimens. The variety characteristics of 1971 DFS 101 show dramatic doubling in God We Trust Liberty, and the date with secondary images sufficiently bold that preliminary identification is possible without magnification, though definitive attribution requires careful comparison. This accessibility distinguishes it from subtle varieties that challenge even experienced collectors and partly explains strong market following. The authentication requires attention to mint mark, because D-mint double dies require clear Denver origin confirmation differentiating them from Philadelphia counterparts that might be offered mistakenly or fraudulently. The population data from PCGS reveals almost unbelievable scarcity, with fewer than 24 examples certified across all grades and the majority grading MS64 or lower, making the MS65 realization particularly significant as among finest known. The Denver Mint production of 1970 Lincoln cents approached 2.9 billion pieces, creating statistical barrier to variety discovery that makes the certified population even more remarkable and suggests that despite massive original striking, only single die or small die group exhibited hub doubling, creating absolute rarity regardless of condition considerations. The historical context of 1971 places us in the Nixon administration's first term with the continuing Vietnam conflict, the introduction of decimal currency in the United Kingdom, and the general monetary stability of the Bretton Woods system's final years. Those of you who remember this period will recall the confidence in American coinage and the continued circulation of silver coins alongside clad coinage, creating numismatic richness that younger collectors can scarcely imagine. The discovery timeline for 1971 D double die extended over years because initial recognition focused on Philadelphia varieties and Denver production was assumed standard until specific comparison revealed unmistakable hub doubling in accumulated holdings. This pattern of delayed recognition followed by rapid price appreciation characterizes many significant modern varieties and rewards patient systematic examination. The technical die characteristics include specific relationships between date digits and surrounding devices, with the doubling showing characteristic rounded profiles of hub origin rather than mechanical damage, flat shelf appearance, and the mint mark position matching established 1971 D production standards. Professional grading has become essential for market acceptance with raw specimens trading at substantial discounts to certified equivalents, and the variety attribution specifically noted on holder to command specialized premiums. The investment framework for 1971 D double die requires recognition that we're dealing with classic absolute rarity in certified population regardless of the large original mintage, because the variety occurred on limited die production and surviving specimens are extraordinarily few. This structural scarcity supports prices that might seem Disconnected from mintage figures to those unfamiliar with variety collecting economics, the preservation characteristics of 1971 Denver cents reflect the mature bronze composition that preceded copper-plated zinc's introduction, meaning that environmental stability is generally superior to modern cents, though spotting, oxidation, and improper handling still threaten high-grade certification. The finest known specimens almost certainly derive from mint set or careful roll preservation. Contemporaneous with striking, the color designation follows standard Lincoln cent criteria, with full red commanding substantial premium, though the extreme rarity means that collectors often accept red-brown for otherwise superb pieces. This market flexibility reflects supply constraints rather than relaxed standards, and the MS65 red realization represents pinnacle achievement in preservation quality. The comparative rarity analysis with 1971 Philadelphia double die reveals interesting market dynamics, because while Philadelphia varieties were recognized earlier and show larger certified population, the Denver specimens now command equivalent or superior prices, reflecting delayed discovery and current supply constraints. This inversion of expected value hierarchy based on mint reputation illustrates how actual certified population and collector demand interact. The authentication expertise required for 1971 D double die has developed considerably, with clear attribution criteria now established, though collectors should remain vigilant against misattributed Philadelphia specimens or genuine Denver coins without variety designation. The diagnostic mint mark characteristics for genuine Denver double dies include specific size, shape, and position relationships that comparison with standard 1971 D production confirms, and the mint mark itself shows normal single impression, distinguishing variety origin from mint mark punching errors. The market liquidity, while constrained by tiny supply, has benefited from major auction house representation, and the Stack's-Bowers result established transparent benchmark that subsequent transactions reference. This institutional infrastructure supports confident participation by informed collectors. The die state analysis for authenticated specimens has revealed production sequence and wearing patterns that refine understanding of original striking volume, though absolute numbers remain speculative. The tiny certified population suggests very limited original production, perhaps single die pair used briefly before replacement. The personal connection for collectors who lived through 1971 creates temporal resonance that enriches numismatic experience. These were coins of everyday circulation, potential finds in change, though the certified population suggests successful locating extraordinarily improbable. The historical memory of that era's challenges and transitions informs appreciation of these artifacts. The preservation challenge for any 1971 D discovery involves immediate appropriate authentication, because bronze cents, while more stable than zinc cord, modern issues still vulnerable to improper cleaning, environmental damage, and handling that reduces certification potential and market value. The variety attribution standards for 1971 double dies have converged on FS 101 designation, though collectors should verify specific die marriage because minor variations exist and price differentials can be substantial between confirmed FS 101 and related but distinct attributions. The competitive bidding environment at auction for the finest known specimens reflects recognition by multiple collectors that opportunity for acquisition at any price may be limited given population constraints, and the $99,000 result reflects aggressive rational bidding under conditions of anticipated regret. The investment return characteristics for 1971 D double die show strong appreciation from initial recognition levels, though absolute return depends entirely on entry timing and grade quality. The fundamental supply constraint appears permanent, supporting continued price strength barring unlikely hoard discoveries that would substantially increase certified population. The community of specialists studying 1971 varieties has developed sophisticated analytical frameworks for die identification, rarity assessment, and market valuation that elevate collecting to numismatic science. This intellectual engagement attracts committed collectors and supports rigorous standards. The technical characteristics for rapid preliminary screening include obvious date and motto doubling that distinguishes FS 101 From normal strikes, but definitive attribution requires detailed comparison with authenticated specimens and ideally professional certification. The price structure across available grades shows expected steepening at top, though MS65 red represents near unobtainable standard given current population, with most collectors seeking representation at MS63. MS64 levels if available. The authentication challenges include risk of altered mint marks added to Philadelphia specimens or tooling to simulate doubling. Engagement with established dealers and major grading services mitigates these risks. What we're examining next involves a minting error with such dramatic value implications that it redefines understanding of what's possible in Lincoln Cent collecting, and that progression from recognized value to truly extraordinary provides narrative structure for our complete examination. The cultural memory of early 1970s America for collectors of appropriate age includes economic uncertainty, environmental awareness, and the continuing social transformations that shaped subsequent decades. The 1971 double die serves as tangible connection to this complex era. The die production analysis has suggested that additional specimens may await discovery in overlooked collections and rolls, though probability of high-grade red examples is remote given time elapsed and handling patterns. This possibility maintains collector engagement and justifies continued systematic search. The market education function performed by the Stack's-Bowers auction created widespread awareness of 1971 double die significance that previous private transactions could not achieve. This transparent price discovery benefits the entire collecting community by establishing credible benchmarks. The preservation technology for bronze cents has been well established for decades, with standard recommendations for inert storage, environmental control, and handling protocols that maintain original surfaces and certification potential. The 1971 benefits from this accumulated knowledge, though discovery specimens may have suffered improper prior storage. The variety identification resources include standard references with specialized supplements documenting 1971 die marriages and comparison images that facilitate confident attribution. This infrastructure supports informed market participation. The investment case for 1971 double die emphasizes irreplaceability given tiny certified population and the difficulty of assembling any significant holding. This collector competition for individual specimens supports individual piece pricing power. The technical die marriage research continues with new attributions and refinements adding to knowledge base even as certified population grows minimally. This ongoing research maintains intellectual engagement for specialists. The authentication standards, while well developed, require careful application because premium values create incentive for fraud, and the collector benefits from professional grading service examination and established dealer relationships. The personal discovery potential, while extremely remote, maintains romantic appeal of numismatics and the occasional authenticated find in long-held collections keeps this possibility vivid in collector imagination. The market maturity demonstrated by major auction handling and transparent pricing supports confident long-term planning for committed collectors. The comparative analysis with other double die dates reveals 1971 occupies particularly strong position because of dramatic doubling, clear diagnostics, and the documented auction history that establishes market legitimacy. This combination of factors supports continued collector interest and price strength. As we approach our final examination, the accumulated knowledge of authentication, market dynamics, and historical context will illuminate the most extraordinary value in our entire sequence. Your subscription and engagement help us invest in better research and content, so if you're finding this worthwhile, I'd welcome your support. The historical significance of 1971 double die varieties extends to understanding mint production quality during era of significant administrative and technical transition. The Denver Mint's participation in dramatic variety production challenges assumptions about Philadelphia dominance and enriches collecting possibilities. The final coin will require all developed expertise to appreciate fully, and I anticipate that examination will provide fitting culmination to this exploration of modern Lincoln Cent rarities. Share this information with fellow collectors who appreciate substantive content and subscribe to the Coin Merchant for continued quality research. Next, 1970 Lincoln penny. There exists in American numismatics a category of coins so rare that their very existence was doubted by knowledgeable collectors for years, even after initial reports of discovery surfaced in specialist publications, and the 1970 small date Lincoln cent with double die obverse represents the pinnacle of this category, achieving documented values that place it among the most valuable regular issue coins struck for circulation in the 20th century. Because when we examine the auction record established at Heritage Auctions January 2018 Florida United Numismatist signature sale, we encounter a figure that demands careful contextualization and full technical understanding. The hammer fell at $110,000 for a PCGS MS-64 red specimen, and this was not an anomaly or misattributed piece but the culmination of years of patient verification, population documentation, and market development that transformed initial skepticism into confirmed numismatic reality. For those of us who remember the late 1960s and early 1970s, this coin carries particular resonance because 1970 represented transition and uncertainty, the final year of heavy silver coin withdrawals from circulation, the continued Vietnam conflict, the environmental movement's emergence, and the subtle but perceptible shift in American confidence that would characterize subsequent decades. The San Francisco Mint's production of proof and uncirculated coinage, including the small date cent varieties, reflected administrative decisions about mint operations that would see the facility's temporary closure and eventual reopening as primarily proof-producing operation. The authentication of 1970 small date double die requires understanding of the basic small date versus large date distinction that characterizes this transitional year, because the Mint introduced new date size during 1970, with Philadelphia and Denver using large date obverse dies for most production, while San Francisco struck both varieties, with the small date representing scarcer overall production. The doubling on premium specimens shows in Liberty in God We Trust, and the date with characteristic rounded hub doubling profiles that distinguish genuine variety from mechanical damage or die deterioration. Doubling the Mint mark on proof and uncirculated specimens shows suffix variation that confirms San Francisco origin and distinguishes from potential Philadelphia or Denver counterfeits. The population data from PCGS reveals extraordinary scarcity, with fewer than 10 confirmed small date double die specimens across all grades, and the MS-64 red realization representing among the finest known, if not the finest, given potential private holdings not yet certified. This population structure explains the exceptional auction price, because absolute rarity combines with condition rarity and collector competition for registry, set completion, and variety specialization. The technical die characteristics include specific relationships between date digits and design elements, with the small date showing distinctively different 7 and 0 shapes compared to large date counterparts, and the doubling sufficiently dramatic that definitive attribution is possible with careful examination under magnification. The investment framework for 1970 small date double die requires recognition that we're dealing with confirmed rarity that was initially disputed and only gradually accepted through patient documentation. This authentication history adds narrative dimension that supports collector interest beyond pure scarcity. The discovery timeline extended over decades because initial small date recognition focused on normal strikes, and the double die variety was sufficiently rare that systematic examination of many specimens was required to confirm genuine hub doubling versus occasional coincidental marks. The Stack's, Bowers, and Heritage auction houses have established transparent price history for authenticated specimens, with the $110,000 result providing anchor for valuation that subsequent transactions reference. Though the extreme rarity means that public auction appearances are infrequent at best, the preservation characteristics of 1970 proof and uncirculated cents reflect the high-quality production standards of San Francisco operations during this period, with generally excellent strike and surface quality, though copper spotting and environmental damage remain threats to red designation and top grades. The finest known specimens benefited from immediate recognition as significant and appropriate storage since acquisition. The comparative rarity with other double die dates reveals 1970 small date occupying unique position because of the small date production context, San Francisco Mint Association, and the extraordinary certified population constraints that make each authenticated specimen effectively irreplaceable. The authentication expertise required has developed to high standard, with clear diagnostic criteria established, though collectors should remain aware of altered pieces and misattributed large date specimens that might be offered as small date varieties. The market liquidity, while constrained by near non-existent supply, has achieved institutional support through major grading service recognition and auction house representation that provides confidence for substantial acquisition decisions. The die state analysis for authenticated specimens, while limited by tiny sample, has suggested early die state production with sharp doubling and minimal die wear consistent with very limited original striking before die replacement or correction. The personal connection for collectors who remember 1970 creates layered temporal resonance. These were coins of potential circulation, though the proof and mint set origin of authenticated specimens suggests most entered numismatic channels. Promptly, the historical memory of eras, transitions, and uncertainties informs appreciation of these artifacts as tangible connections to complex period. The preservation challenge for any 1970s small date discovery involves immediate professional evaluation because the premium values attached to confirmed specimens create incentive for fraud, and the authentication complexity requires expert examination. The variety attribution standards have converged on recognition of small date double die as distinct and valuable variety with specific die markers documented in specialist references and population reports. This institutional legitimacy supports market confidence and price stability. The competitive bidding environment for the finest known specimens when they appear reflects recognition by collectors that opportunity may not recur for years if ever, given population constraints, and the $110,000 heritage result represents rational aggressive bidding. Under unique supply conditions, the investment return characteristics show remarkable appreciation from initial recognition, though absolute returns depend on entry timing and the difficulty of acquisition at any price given supply constraints. The personal discovery potential, while extraordinarily remote, maintains the romantic possibility that keeps collectors examining proof sets and accumulations, and the occasional authenticated find in long-held collections keeps this possibility vivid. The community of specialists studying 1970 varieties has developed sophisticated understanding of die production, mint mark characteristics, and attribution criteria that supports confident identification. This expertise benefits the entire collecting infrastructure. The technical characteristics for preliminary identification include obvious date and motto differences that distinguish small from large date, but definitive double die attribution requires careful comparison and ideally professional certification. Given premium values, the price structure across the tiny certified population shows limited gradation because even small quality differences separate significantly different rarity tiers, and collectors often seek any certified example regardless of precise grade. The authentication challenges include sophisticated counterfeiting and alteration of normal small date pieces to simulate doubling. Engagement with established dealers and major grading services provides essential protection. The cultural memory of early 1970s America includes the numismatic transitions from silver to clad coinage, the evolving mint operations, and the collecting practices that preserve significant specimens. This heritage informs current market appreciation. The die production analysis suggests that the small date double die resulted from specific hubbing anomalies during limited production period, with multiple impressions misaligned to create dramatic doubling that was recognized as problematic and corrected promptly. This limited production window explains extreme rarity. The market education function performed by major auction results and specialist publications has created widespread awareness of 1970s small date double die significance that initial private transactions could not achieve. This transparency benefits collector community. The preservation technology for copper proof and uncirculated coinage has been refined over decades with established protocols for environmental control, handling, and storage that maintain original surfaces. The 1970s Specimens benefit from this accumulated knowledge if discovered in appropriate condition. The variety identification resources include specialized references documenting 1970 dye varieties, mint mark styles, and comparison images that facilitate confident attribution. This infrastructure supports informed participation. The investment case emphasizes irreplaceability given certified population that may be countable on single digits and the collector competition for any available specimen supports substantial pricing. The authentication standards have achieved maturity with clear criteria and professional consensus supporting confident market participation for appropriately qualified specimens. The historical significance extends to understanding mint operations during transitional period and the quality control practices that allowed dramatic varieties to escape into production and preservation. This technical and administrative history enriches collecting beyond catalog values. The personal engagement with this extraordinary value requires recognition that few collectors will handle authenticated specimens directly, and most will participate through research, auction, observation, and appreciation of exceptional rarity. This democratized access maintains broad collector interest. The market maturity demonstrated by professional grading support major auction representation and transparent pricing suggests institutional legitimacy that will persist, supporting confident long-term commitment for specialists. I want to express genuine appreciation for your attention through this comprehensive examination of extraordinary Lincoln cent values, and emphasize that the knowledge we've developed together applies across numismatic categories and market conditions. The principles of authentication, population analysis, historical context, and market dynamics that illuminated these specific coins will serve your collecting interests throughout your numismatic journey. If you value accurate, well-researched coin information, subscribing to the Coin Merchant ensures you won't miss future discoveries we uncover. Examine your collections carefully with the diagnostic knowledge you've gained. Share this information with fellow collectors who appreciate substantive numismatic content, and join us in continuing exploration of the remarkable treasures that American coinage offers to informed and patient researchers. Your comments about personal discoveries, examination experiences, and collecting philosophy are genuinely welcome as they enrich our community of serious numismatists. The commitment to quality research and verified information that characterizes the Coin Merchant will continue in future examinations, and I look forward to sharing additional significant finds with this discerning audience. Remember that the values we've discussed represent documented market transactions for authenticated specimens, not speculative projections. And the path to realizing such values runs through careful education, proper authentication, and informed market participation. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your commitment to serious numismatics.